Hi, my name's Patrick Phelps. Welcome to Mining Matters. A friend of mine texted me through a story the other day off Newsroom's website, or an opinion piece, I should say. It was an opinion piece, and the writer was saying that it's time for New Zealand to ditch coal. The writer was right when writing that 2020 was another record year, tied equal, I think, as one of the hottest years on record. We had fires, floods and sea level rise. But his comments on coal within New Zealand, and internationally for that matter, simply don't stack up. First, Tim Jones of the Coal Action Network Aotearoa writes that the government should ban new coal mines, ban extensions to existing coal mines, and rapidly phase down operating coal mines as quickly as possible. I think it's better to focus on emissions overall rather than picking on any particular fuels, but if you want to pick on any particular fuel within New Zealand, do so knowing that coal's contribution within our overall emissions profile is relatively modest. If banning fuels was the way to go, then picking on oil would be the sensible one to go for. It accounts for about 3.5 times the annual CO2 emissions of coal within New Zealand. Banning people from using oil would make a lot more sense. Such a ban would be about as practical as it would be popular. His next bold claim is that New Zealand is dragging the chain when it comes to climate change action compared to other countries. Now, if I were being generous, I would say that this is a mistake. If I were being a bit harsh, I'd say that this is a lie. Yes, our total emissions as a country have gone up quite significantly on their base level since 1990. And yes, these developed countries have managed to grow their economies while at the same time keeping their emissions growth very flat, if not quite significantly reducing their emissions. But as you can see, when comparing the emissions and population growth of these countries, only Ireland has had a population increase equal to New Zealand's. On a per capita basis though, our carbon dioxide emissions aren't particularly high. Of these countries that I've outlined, the ones that have achieved an emissions reduction have done so by one or all of the measures that you can see to my left or right. In terms of the old coal and natural gas switcheroo, a good example of this is the United Kingdom. They were using a phenomenal amount of coal in the 1990s. Since then they've drastically reduced their coal consumption, and while their energy consumption overall has dropped, a lot of the void that was left by coal, if you like, has been filled by natural gas. The French, as another example, achieve their very low carbon dioxide emissions per capita not through natural gas, not through renewables, but through nuclear energy. They have the highest nuclear energy consumption per capita of any country in the world, and it accounts for 42% of their total primary energy supply, and I think 80% of their electricity generation. So we're nuclear free, we've little, in fact no, real prospect of displacing our coal use for natural gas where we do use coal. We can't import electricity the way that other countries do if we're not generating enough ourselves, and we've had substantial population growth over the last 30 years. There's not really any other country, as far as I'm aware, in the OECD that fits this description. That's what makes comparisons between different countries in these aspects quite tenuous. Tim's next bold claim is that, well, it's not bold, it's actually true. He sort of points out that steelmaking can be a bit boom and bust. I won't really argue with that. Coking coal, like a lot of things that New Zealand exports, is a commodity. It is cyclical in terms of its demand and the price that you get for it internationally. That's true of dairy, that's true of meat, that's true of wine, that's true of apples, it's certainly true of tourism at the moment if you want to look at it that way. Everything's got its ups and downs. It's up to individual people what they want to do for a job, and it's up to investors where they put their money. You know, people who work on ski fields, they chase winters around the world depending on where the ski season is. If you're a shearer in a gang, you follow the shearing around the country, and I guess you take the highs and the lows of that. If you happen to work on orchards, then I guess you have to pick and choose where that work is. If you're a coal miner, then yes, you follow the resource and you follow the mining operations. If people are happy to live that way, then they're happy to live that way, and it's not really for opinion piece writers to tell them otherwise. The next bold call, I guess, in this article is that it's disgraceful that a country like New Zealand, with a divine providence, I suppose, of renewable energy resources, is still using coal. Even countries like Iceland and Norway that have some of the highest, the greatest abundance of renewable resources in the world, they'll still use a little coal, natural gas, or oil-based fossil fuels to some extent or another. He then says that there are alternatives to fossil fuels already, or that they're very fast approaching. Well, I'm sorry, but they're not. Yes, renewables are growing at an incredible rate worldwide, but it's from an incredibly low base as well. And at the same time, as they're trying to catch up with fossil fuels, fossil fuel demand is growing as well, as poor countries want to be like the rich countries. On the subject of New Zealand's electricity generation that comes from fossil fuels like coal and natural gas at Genesis Energy's Huntly Power Plant, Tim says that batteries, energy storage, is soon going to remove the need for that. But according to Genesis Energy, replacing, I guess, or substituting the security that our highly renewable electricity sector gets from natural gas and coal, which can be turned up or scaled down as needed, replacing that with battery storage. And I'm just going to make sure I get these numbers right. According to their 2020 annual report, replacing that natural gas and coal capacity with storage would require 140 Tesla Powerball batteries for every house in the country. This would cost apparently $2 million per household. One of the boldest claims that Mr. Jones makes in his opinion piece is that we no longer need coal for steel production because we can make it from hydrogen, as they're doing in Europe, as if all of Europe's steel mills run on hydrogen. Hydrogen made from renewable electricity has been used to produce steel in Europe in a laboratory sense. It is possibly decades away from being commercially scalable. In Europe, the same Europe, by the way, the very same Europe, as recently as September 2020, when the European Commission published its list of critical raw materials, about 30 things that it deems necessary for, I don't know, strategic significance, I guess. In its list of critical raw materials, you will find coking coal, for about 5 or 10 reasons actually, one of which is that it is needed for renewable energy. I guess windmills are made of steel and steel's made of coking coal. Tim finishes dismissively saying that the fossil fuel era is over. Let's put coal on the ash heap of history. The fossil fuel era is far from over. We're not even at the peak of it yet. CO2 emissions, fossil fuel consumption continues to rise to each year basically to its highest level in the 4.5 billion year history of this planet. New Zealand alone last year imported over 1 million tonnes of coal, the greatest quantity that it's imported for the last 14 years. Why would we even consider shutting our own coal mines when our appetite for coal can't even be satisfied with our domestic production? Tim Jones is entitled to his opinions and he's entitled to write them. I've got no issue with that. Newsroom, however, as a media agency, I think should be a bit more responsible before simply giving a platform to people who are publishing what are either lies or mistakes. The company could argue that it's just a comment piece, it's not actually a piece of journalism, it's just opinion, and that's fine, I guess, but I don't think that there are many respectable news outlets today in New Zealand who would publish something from a die-hard anti-vaxxer, someone who's going around claiming that 1080 kills substantially more native birds than it saves, people who think that fluoride in water does stuff to your brain, people who deny climate change being caused by fossil fuels, for example. You wouldn't give a platform to these people in a way that sort of suggests that what they've written is credible. So the only conclusion that I can draw is that Newsroom doesn't really care about these standards, or that the standards for accuracy and honesty are allowed to vary depending on the agenda or the background of the person who's doing the writing. Anyway, thanks for watching.